Hi guys, and welcome back to your English 2 classroom. Today we're going to talk about your assignment for today, which is to read the second part of this paired passage, which is American flag stands for tolerance. Yesterday, and you may not have finished this assignment, but yesterday you read the Supreme Court case determining whether flag burning was a legal or illegal protest in Texas versus Johnson majority opinion. Today, you're going to read an editorial that was published in the Chicago Tribune, the newspaper, shortly after this verdict came down. Okay, and so this person, Ronald J. Allen, wanted to weigh in with his opinion on what he thought about the court decision, the Supreme Court decision. So again, we're still thinking about the essential question: how do we engage with others while staying true to ourselves? And we're going to be comparing the arguments that were made. First of all, you need to see, does this person have the same opinion as the court, agree with the court, or have differing opinions? And if so, or in whatever case, does this person have differing opinions about that, or different ways to support the opinions? So the first thing that I want you to think about is comparing the arguments. Also, consider how the purpose and audience for the texts differ. These are very different. The court case is for future reference and for future court cases. And so in one court case, you refer back to another one. So this Supreme Court case, where they decided that it was not unconstitutional to burn the flag, that it was legal to do that in protest, that case is going to resonate for however long. People will always go back to that case and say, yeah, but the Supreme Court decided that people could do that. So here's a question to think about, because this is a very controversial topic. People have very strong and differing opinions on it. So when someone has a different opinion than you, how can you handle that? So I want you to go ahead and highlight this sentence and take a note over it, okay? So what is the appropriate way to react if people have opinions that you find hateful or disrespectful? This textbook was written, it wasn't written very recently. It's probably several years old. But I think what's going on in the world today is this question is very relevant to that. So people have very differing opinions. We share them on social media. People fight on social media. And you have to ask yourself, exactly how much good am I doing? Am I really changing anyone's opinion, or am I just fighting? So what is the appropriate way, and this is your opinion, what is the appropriate way to react if people have opinions that you find hateful or disrespectful? Okay, so I do want you to answer that question. How can you respond in a way that keeps the disagreement from turning into a fight? Now, some people may have the opinion that it should turn into a fight. I don't really agree with that, but that's just my opinion. So how can you keep disagreements about politics or protest, how can you keep that from turning into a fight? You're going to evaluate the argument that's made here. Editorials present an author's argument about a contested or controversial issue. A well-crafted argument contains the following elements. We're going to talk about these. If you're going to state a very strong opinion, you won't be able to change other people's minds if you don't have credible evidence and reasonable, logical evidence to support it. So in this genre, it states the author's stance on an issue and supports the opinion with relevant evidence and addresses potential counterclaims. So you address, I know other people may feel this way about it, but this is how I feel and they're wrong. And it usually ends with a call to action. I know that last year in Mrs. Edwards' class, those of you that have been here, learned about how to write a persuasive essay. This is very similar to that in that unit on rhetoric that you did. So a claim is a statement of overall opinion. You present reasons and evidence, which may include data, statistics, anecdotes, which are short little stories to back up your claim, facts and other examples that support the claim. Counterclaims and counter arguments. In a counterclaim or a counter argument, you acknowledge the reasons an opponent might disagree with you. So the best thing to do is pick the main reason that that the opposite point of view, the main thing that they always point out to support their opinion. And you say, okay, I know this is what you believe. This is your main argument for your opinion, but you're wrong, and this is why. A different kind of acknowledgement is a concession and rebuttal. Okay, so this one says, here's what you think, and this is why you're wrong. This is your main reason, and this is why it's wrong. This one, in a concession, you concede. You say, okay, this counter argument that you have is valid, but it's not valid, it's not strong enough to change the overall opinion. So yes, you do. An example of this would be if someone was arguing about protests that are going on at a certain time, maybe even the flag burning protest that we read about yesterday. And you might say, okay, yes, I agree. You have a point that burning the flag is disrespectful. People fought and died for what that flag represents, and you're disrespecting those people when you burn the flag. So you might say, yes, I agree with that point. People are being disrespectful. It is being disrespectful to our veterans and our war heroes and our war dead. However, and this is not my opinion necessarily, this is just how you can make a concession. However, that is not a strong enough reason to take away someone's individual right to protest in the way that they see fit. Okay? The protests that are going on right now, you could make the same arguments, especially when it comes to people destroying property and those kinds of things. So you can make a concession and a rebuttal. And then in the conclusion to an argument, you usually have a call to action for the reader. So as you read American Flag Stands for Tolerance, think about all of these elements and how he uses them. You're going to analyze the rhetoric that's used. Rhetoric is specific words and language structures that make a message memorable. So the art of rhetoric is the art of public speaking or the art of persuasion. So you can make appeals to, you can have ethos, pathos, logos, appeals to logic and reason, appeals based on the credibility of the author, and emotional appeals. Okay. Parallelism is a form of repetition in which a grammatical pattern is repeated to create rhythm, link ideas, or evoke emotions. And we'll talk about that one more later. Antithesis, you're asked about that one today. Placing two ideas side by side to show the contrast between them. Make sure you're pronouncing this correctly, antithesis. A lot of times you'll hear someone say, that idea is the antithesis to something else. That means it's the exact opposite. Look for shifts in tone or mood. Changes in mood, attitude, or point, often signaled by words such as but, however, and although. You'll see those a lot when someone's making a concession or a rebuttal. I see your point. However, you believe this, but. Also look for logical fallacies, an error in reasoning that undermines an argument or renders it invalid. I see a lot of logical fallacies around and about, especially on social media. Won't really point any of those out right now, but kind of like, this is a logical fallacy. You're asking me to give to an animal charity, but there are children who need food and clothes. To me, well, that is a logical fallacy, because just because I'm not saying that I'm giving money to children, you're assuming that I'm only giving money to pets or to animals. And just because one group needs help doesn't mean the other group doesn't need help too. So just because kids need help doesn't mean that animals don't need help too. And there are people that help children and there are people who help animals. And it doesn't mean that you have to pick one or the other. So it's kind of a logical fallacy, or it is a logical fallacy to say, well, we're talking about heart disease. What about AIDS? We're talking about breast cancer. What about autism? I mean, there's room for all of those things. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that in the room right now? Okay, critical vocabulary. Here are your vocabulary words: icon, sanctity, and dogma. Look those up before you complete the activity, and then complete the activity, and then we'll circle back to these words later on at the end of the lesson. And then you have a little bit of a grammar lesson here over a dash. This is what a dash looks like. It's a punctuation mark that sets a phrase or clause off from other parts of the sentence. They can take the place of commas, parentheses, or colons. So let's just look at some examples. Thus, we do not have one official dogma. Each American may think and express anything he wants. So a dogma is like a really set in stone idea, something that an individual or a group believes is the absolute truth and it can't be changed or negotiated or say anything against it. Okay, so do you hear that big pause right there with that dash? Thus, we do not have one official dogma. Each American may think and express anything he wants. And instead of parentheses, the American flag, which is one of our most important symbols, is the subject. Now notice that if you took this phrase out, the American flag is the subject. These dashes just kind of insert something into the middle of that sentence, and it could be with parentheses as well. And then this one, instead of a comma, we say, we wonder soon after the court case has been decided what to do next. So a dash is not something that you would ever have to use. I wouldn't say, okay, you have to have a dash right here, because there's usually a punctuation mark that could substitute for that. But a dash is a very effective punctuation mark to use sometimes. All right, now we get to the reading part. We're just going to, I'm not going to read it to you. We're just going to go over the questions. So law professor Ronald J. Allen published this editorial in the Chicago Tribune in June of 1989 in response to the Texas versus Johnson decision and the uproar that it caused. So there was a lot of controversy over this. I do remember it very vividly. I was in high school. I was a junior in high school when this court case decision came about. So we talked about it a lot. So prepare to compare. As you read, consider your own opinion of the issue and how might your ideas defend or challenge those Allen presents. Remember, anytime we read something in class that states an author's opinion or an author's point of view, a cultural point of view, a religious point of view, anything that we read in class that comes from another person is that person's own opinion. You know how someone will say on their Facebook or Twitter, tweets are my own, they don't represent the company that I work for or any of that. And that's the disclaimer that I always make. When we read something, that doesn't mean that I'm saying this is how you should think. You are reading it and evaluating the claims on your own. So this man states his opinion and you decide whether you agree with it or not. As a high school student, you definitely are closer to being an adult and you are able to form your own opinions. So that's what I want you to do, okay? So you read this piece and he starts comparing what was going on in China at the time. So you've probably learned in your history class about Tiananmen Square in China. That was going on also when I was in high school, or that happened when I was in high school as well. There was a big movement in China against communism mainly by young people. And in Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government sent in tanks to squash the rebellion, basically, and many people were killed. So he's comparing that, the way China treats its citizens, to the way American citizens and our society works. So I want you to think about that. So highlight two ideas in paragraph 1 that the author places together in order to contrast them. That's an antithesis, to put two things side by side. So he's contrasting the way China handled an uproar and the way America handles an uproar. And what is the author's effect? What is the effect of the author's use of this antithesis? So Remember when you're doing the read that you have to do the highlighting and annotating. I always grade these. When you read something, I always grade the annotations and highlights and the questions that are embedded within the text. So make sure that you're doing a good job on these. You do two things. You highlight and then you answer thoroughly in complete sentences, and answer the question that's asked. So what effect does it have when the author puts these two contradictory ideas together? And then here's a close reading screencast. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's two people discussing the text, which helps you think about it and how you think about it as you're reading it. You can see it's them modeling how to do that. I really encourage you to watch that. Watch those when they're available. Next question, highlight the claim Alan makes in paragraph 3, and how does he support this claim? Well, here's his claim. The Supreme Court was not wrong. So that's how we know, well, we would know from the first paragraph as well. But here he very strongly states that he agrees with the Supreme Court's decision that it is legal for someone to burn the American flag as a form of protest. He says they were not wrong, but he gives some different reasons than the judge gave in his opinion that we read yesterday. So I want you to be thinking about, how does he support his claim? I would highlight his claims as well, okay? So that's going to require more than one sentence because he has more than one way to support his claim. How does Alan support his claim? That's the author, Alan. That's his last name. And then highlight a word in paragraph 4 that might interfere with your understanding. Basically, what word in paragraph 4, when you first looked at it, you might not know exactly what it meant. I see this. Concomitant. I'm going to be honest, I have never heard that word before. One that occurs or exists concurrently with another. Concomitant. So that word would interfere with my understanding because I don't know that word. So what do I do about it? Basically, how can you determine what that word means? Well, I just did one thing, which was click on it. But I might need to do something else. I might need to go to Google and Google that word and look for that word used in a sentence. Look for some examples. Look for some synonyms and antonyms for that as well. And last question. Highlight the dash in paragraph 9. We just talked about that. So this is the dash. This is a hyphen. The shorter of the two is a hyphen. Flag burning. It's putting two words together as one word, a compound word. This is the dash. Okay. So highlight the dash. And how does it link two ideas in this sentence? What are the two ideas that it is linking? So just a good sentence explaining that to me. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the lesson for today? You're going to do the get ready, answer this question in a note, read all this information again. I just read it to you or talked about it with you, discussed it. Do this vocabulary activity, and then do all the highlighting and annotations that it asks you to do, and answer the 4 questions. All right. Email me if you have any questions, or if you're in person, ask me in person, and I'll see you next time.